22 months. That's how long it had been since I signed the papers, packed my car with whatever fit into 3 suitcases, and drove north out of Vancouver without looking in the rearview mirror. 22 months since I stopped being Mara Ashford Vance and went back to just Mara Ashford. 22 months since I told myself I was finally free. And then my phone rang at 11:15 on a Tuesday night, and a woman with a clipped, professional voice said, "Is this Mara Ashford? We have you listed as the emergency contact for a Mr. Ronan Vance." I sat up in the dark. My daughter was asleep in the next room. I could hear the white noise machine through the wall, the one I'd bought because she inherited my light sleeping, my tendency to startle awake at nothing. "He's been admitted to St. Paul's," the woman continued. "He's stable, but he's asking for you." I didn't say anything for a long moment. "Ma'am?" "There must be a mistake," I said. "We've been divorced for almost 2 years. I understand. He's listed you as his only contact. We wouldn't be calling if he hadn't specifically requested it." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. The baby monitor on my nightstand glowed green. Steady. Calm. Everything my chest wasn't. Ronan Vance was not the kind of man who asked anyone for anything. I should tell you who he is so you understand why that phone call felt like the ground shifting underneath my feet. Ronan built his first company at 24 out of a rented basement in East Vancouver. By 30, he controlled 3 firms, had his name on 2 towers in the downtown core, and had been profiled in every business publication that mattered in this country. People described him using words like visionary and relentless. His competitors used different words. I'd heard those too, over the years. When I met him, I was 26 and working as a paralegal at a firm that handled some of his contracts. He came in for a meeting, and I handed him a folder in the hallway. And he looked at me like I'd said something interesting, even though I hadn't said anything at all. We were married 14 months later. I thought I understood what I was getting into. I thought love was enough to make sense of a man like that. Someone who ran on 4 hours of sleep, who answered emails at 2 in the morning, who kept a calendar so full. There were days I genuinely wasn't sure he remembered I existed. I told myself it was temporary, that once things settled down, once the next acquisition was done, the next deal closed, the next quarter wrapped up, he'd come home to me. He never did. Not really. What broke us, what broke me, wasn't a single thing. It was the accumulation. The birthday dinner, he canceled twice, then forgot entirely. The weekend in Tofino I'd planned for months, alone, because he got pulled into a board meeting that ran through Sunday. The way he'd look up from his phone sometimes, and seem genuinely surprised I was still there, sitting across from him at the kitchen table in the house I'd tried to make like film, and the thing I never told him. The thing I found out 6 weeks before I finally left. I didn't tell him, because by then I already knew it wouldn't matter. He'd made that clear the only time I'd brought it up. We'd been driving back from his colleague's dinner party, and I'd said, carefully, that I'd been thinking about the future, about what we wanted, and he'd said, without looking at me, "I'm not at a point in my life where I can take on something like that, Mara. You know that." I did know that. He'd said it before, but hearing it again in the dark car, with the rain hitting the windshield, something in me finally understood that he wasn't talking about timing. He was talking about never. So I left, and I took our daughter with me, without him knowing she existed. Her name is Willa. She's 18 months old, and she has his dark eyes and my stubborn mouth, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to me. She started pulling herself up on the furniture last week, and I cried in the kitchen because I was so proud and so lonely at the same time, and there was no one there to see it. I called my sister at 11:30. She answered on the second ring because she always does, because she is the kind of person the world should have more of. "He's in the hospital," I said. A pause. "Ronan?" They called me. I'm still his emergency contact, apparently. "Are you going?" I was already looking at Willa's door. "I don't know." "Mara." My sister's voice was careful. "You know you have to go. I don't have to do anything." "You know what I mean." I did, because there was something I hadn't done yet. Something I'd been putting off with excuses I was running out of. Willa wasn't a secret I'd planned to keep forever. She was a secret I'd kept out of exhaustion. Out of fear, out of the fact that re-entering Ronan Vance's orbit felt like standing too close to a controlled burn. You knew it wasn't supposed to spread. You just couldn't quite trust it. "I'll call you in the morning," I said, and she let me hang up because she knew I'd already made up my mind. St. Paul's at midnight is a different world. The fluorescent lights are too bright and too flat, and the waiting area smells like hand sanitizer and old coffee. And everyone sitting in those chairs looks like they're holding something very carefully so it won't break. I asked for him at reception and gave my name. The nurse, young, with tired eyes and her hair scraped back, checked her screen and said, "He's in 4C. He's been asking for you." "What happened to him?" "The doctor on shift can speak with you." "He was brought in by ambulance around 9. There was an incident at a job site." I didn't ask more. I walked down the corridor with my coat still buttoned and my hands not quite steady, and I told myself this was just something that needed to be done, that it didn't mean anything that I'd gotten into my car without really deciding to, that I'd driven through the rain on the Canby Bridge with my heart going too fast for someone who didn't care anymore. He was awake when I pushed open the door. He looked terrible. There was a gash above his left eyebrow, held together with steri strips, a bruise spreading across his jaw, and an IV line taped to the back of his hand. He was also, somehow, still the most composed-looking person in the room. He had that stillness about him. He'd always had it. Like no matter what was happening around him, he was operating from somewhere very quiet inside himself. He looked at me and something moved across his face that I didn't have a name for. "You came," he said. "You're still listed as a contact on my benefits plan," I said. "Apparently you're still listed on mine too." The corner of his mouth moved. "Sit down, Mara." "I'm fine standing." He didn't argue. He looked at me for a long moment. He had a way of doing that, looking at you until you said the thing you were actually thinking instead of the thing you'd planned to say. "The foreman called the ambulance," he said. A load shifted. I was in the wrong place. "Were you alone?" "No. 2 guys from site were with me. They're fine. A few stitches." "And you?" "Cracked rib. Concussion. Some bruising they're worried about. They want to keep me overnight for monitoring." I looked at him. He looked back at me. He seemed like he wanted to say something else. He seemed actually like he'd been rehearsing it, which was so unlike the man I'd known that it made my chest do something uncomfortable. "I'm glad you're okay," I said, because it was true, even if it was inconvenient. "Mara." He said my name like it was the first word in a sentence he hadn't finished writing yet. "Why did you really leave?" I wasn't expecting that. After 22 months, I wasn't expecting him to lead with that. "We signed papers, Ronan. A judge approved them. I know what we did. I'm asking why." "You know why. I know what you told me. I'm asking what you didn't." The room was very quiet. Down the hall, someone's monitor beeped steadily. A nurse's shoes squeaked against the linoleum. "This isn't the right time for this conversation," I said. "I've been lying in this bed for 3 hours waiting for you. I think it might be the only time." I sat down, not because he asked me to, because my legs suddenly weren't cooperating. I looked at my hands. I thought about the drive here, about the white noise machine I'd left on in Willa's room, about my sister texting me "call me when you're there" from her couch in New Westminster. I thought about 18 months of mornings that were entirely mine, and how much I loved them, and how much I missed having someone to hand a coffee to. "There's something I should have told you," I said, before I left. "I found out I was pregnant when I signed the papers." He didn't move. "I didn't tell you because of what you said. In the car, after the Hendersons' dinner. You made it very clear you didn't want that. I wasn't going to beg you to want something you'd already decided against. Still nothing." He was doing the stillness thing. I couldn't tell what was underneath it, and that terrified me more than anger would have. "Her name is Willa," I said. "She's 18 months old. She's healthy. She's wonderful. Her. His voice was different, something stripped out of it. "Yes." He exhaled. It wasn't quite a breath and wasn't quite a sound. "I have a daughter. You have a daughter." He asked me to get the doctor, which I did, grateful for somewhere to put myself for a few minutes. I stood in the corridor and called my sister with shaking hands, and she picked up on the first ring this time. "I told him," I said. She was quiet for a second. "How did he take it?" "I don't know yet." Okay, she breathed. Okay, where are you? Outside his room. Do you want me to come? I thought about it. No. I think I have to do this part myself. When I went back in, the doctor was already there. A tall woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head, who reviewed his chart with calm efficiency and told him the concussion was moderate. The rib would heal on its own, and they wanted to run another scan in the morning. She spoke to him the way people speak to men like Ronan, efficiently, without softening anything, and he listened and asked exactly 2 questions and she answered them and left. Then it was just us again. Tell me about her, he said. So I did. I sat in that chair with my coat still on. And I told him about the first 3 months when I cried more than she did. About the apartment I'd found in East Van, with the squeaky 3rd step, and the radiator that knocked all winter. I told him about my sister bringing food every Sunday. About Willa's first word, which was more, and her second, which was no. About the way she pats the family dog on the nose with both hands flat like she's reading something. I told him things I'd been holding privately for 1.5 years, and something about the hospital room at midnight made it feel possible. He listened to all of it without interrupting. He asked once, quietly, if she looked like me. She has your eyes, I said. He looked away then, at the window, at the darkness and the rain. I didn't know, when I left that night, that something else was already in motion. I didn't know that the project Ronan had been pushing forward, a mixed-use development in Surrey that had taken up most of his energy for the last 18 months, had a problem attached to it. A person-shaped problem. His project manager, a man named Clifton, who'd been with him for 6 years, and whom Ronan trusted more than almost anyone, had been quietly feeding information to a competing developer. Details about timelines, bids, contractor negotiations. Enough to cost Ronan 2 contracts and a partnership he'd been building for 3 years. I found out from my sister, who found out from her husband, who worked adjacent to that industry and heard things at golf courses. How bad is it? I asked her, the following Saturday, while Willa napped, and we sat at my kitchen table with tea we'd let go cold. Bad, she said. Clifton's been let go. There might be a civil case. Ronan's restructuring 2 of his divisions. How do you know all this? She gave me a look. People talk. What she didn't say, and what I understood anyway, was that the version of Ronan I'd been married to, the one whose whole identity was bound up in the company, the deals, the forward momentum, that version of him was being quietly dismantled in ways he hadn't chosen. I didn't know what that would leave behind. I wasn't sure he did either. He called me 4 days after the hospital. I almost didn't pick up. I want to meet her, he said, when I did. I'd known it was coming. I'd been sitting with it, turning it over. I know. I'm not going to fight you on anything, Mara. I just want to meet my daughter. I need you to understand that she's not a negotiating point. She's not an asset. She's a person. I know that. A pause. I've always known that. You told me you didn't want children. I know what I said. What changed? He was quiet for a moment. I was lying in a hospital bed at midnight, and you told me I had a daughter who pats dogs with both hands flat. I don't know how to explain what changed after that. I looked at Willa, who was on her playmat across the room, methodically transferring wooden blocks from one container to another, with the concentration of someone doing important work. Sunday, I said. We'll meet you at Trout Lake. Somewhere neutral. I don't know what I expected. I'd prepared myself for awkwardness, for Willa to be shy, for the whole thing to feel like a business transaction with a toddler in the middle. I'd prepared my face and my voice and my very reasonable set of boundaries. I hadn't prepared for the way he went completely still when he saw her. She was wearing her yellow jacket and her rubber boots with the ducks on them, and she was crouching at the edge of the path, looking at something in the grass. A beetle, I think, with total absorption. She hadn't noticed us walk up. I watched Ronan Vance, who had negotiated in boardrooms with some of the most aggressive people in the country, who had never once in my presence let anything touch him enough to show on his face. I watched him look at an 18-month-old in duck boots and go absolutely, completely undone. He crouched down a few feet away from her. He didn't try to rush it. She looked up. She looked at him with the frank, assessing expression she gave everyone new. She looked back at the beetle, Then she picked up a small rock and held it out to him with the same flat-palmed offering she gave the dog. He took it. "Thank you," he said, very quietly. She went back to the beetle. He stayed crouched on the path for a long moment, not moving, holding a rock she'd given him, and I had to look away. It didn't fix everything. I want to be clear about that, because life isn't a movie. And Ronan wasn't a different person just because his heart had finally caught up to something it should have understood years ago. He was still the same man who'd missed my birthday and canceled Tofino and answered emails at 2 a.m. Those were patterns that had roots, and roots take time. But he showed up, that Sunday at Trout Lake, and the following Wednesday at the park near my apartment, and the Saturday after that. He learned what she liked: the duck boots, the wooden blocks, the specific picture book with the bear who loses his hat. He called when he said he would. He canceled once and called me an hour before to tell me, which might sound like a low bar, but from him felt like evidence of something. We had the hard conversations, too. He told me that what he'd said in the car that night had been fear talking, not indifference. That he'd grown up in a house where his father had been physically present and emotionally nowhere. And he'd told himself for years that the kindest thing he could do for a child was to not have one. That it was a story he'd told himself so many times he'd started to believe it was a decision instead of a wound. I told him it was too late to go back and fix what those words had done to me, but that it wasn't too late to do something different now. We didn't get back together. Not then. That part is slower, and it should be. Some things you can only rebuild at the pace they actually build, not the pace you wish they would. What I can tell you is that on a Wednesday evening in November, my ex-husband sat on the floor of my apartment in East Vancouver with our daughter in his lap, while she tried to eat a board book about farm animals. And I was in the kitchen making pasta, and from where I was standing, I could see them both through the doorway. He was reading to her in that low, measured voice of his, the one that never shows anything, and she had her head tipped back against his chest, the way she does when she's comfortable. That absolute animal trust that small children have before the world teaches them otherwise. I stood there with water boiling behind me and watched them, and I thought about 22 months of quiet mornings and squeaky stairs and radiator knocking, and all the nights I'd sat with something large and unnamed in my chest that turned out to be grief and love so tangled up, I couldn't tell one from the other. I thought about what my sister said when I called her from the hospital corridor. "I think you have to do this part yourself." And how right she'd been, and also how glad I was that she was 40 minutes away with a casserole dish she brought every Sunday. I thought about Willa's first word, which was more, and how that has always seemed right to me. Not mama or dada or no. Just more. Like she arrived already knowing that whatever this was, she wanted it to keep going. "The bear finds his hat," Ronan said from the living room. Willa said something that wasn't quite a word but was clearly agreement. I went back to the pasta. I turned the burner down. Through the wall I could hear him turn the page.